I'm Jillian, 35 years old, and I was raised by my grandparents in a small Nebraska town. For most of my life, I had no idea I had an identical twin sister. My parents abandoned me when I was barely a month old, but they took my twin with them. I discovered this earth-shattering truth through a random DNA test 5 years ago. Now, 30 years after they left me behind, my parents have proposed something unthinkable. Before I tell you how my parents suggested we swap our entire lives, drop a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe if family mysteries intrigue you. My earliest memories are filled with the scent of my grandmother's homemade bread and the sound of my grandfather's work boots on our creaky farmhouse porch. They were in their 60s when they took me in, already gray-haired and wrinkled, but their hearts were young and overflowing with love. When I was little, I'd ask about my parents, and Grandma would simply say, "They weren't ready for parenthood, sweetie, but we were more than ready for you." As a child, this explanation was enough. I felt special being raised by grandparents who chose me, even if there was always a hollow ache when I saw other kids with their mothers and fathers. Our farmhouse was modest, just outside a town where everyone knew everyone. The yellow paint was peeling and the roof needed patching every spring, but it was home. Grandpa worked as a mechanic until he retired, and Grandma had been a school lunch lady. Their fixed incomes meant we lived frugally, shopping at thrift stores and growing much of our food in Grandpa's immaculate vegetable garden. What we lacked in material wealth, we made up for in love. Grandpa taught me to change oil in a car before I was 10, and Grandma showed me how to make a perfect pie crust, their weathered hands guiding my small ones. Still, I knew I was different. When elementary school classmates drew family trees, mine was conspicuously small. The questions would come, "Where are your real parents?" Or, "Why didn't your mom and dad want you?" Children can be innocently cruel. I learned to answer matter-of-factly, "My grandparents are my family." But privately, I wondered what was wrong with me that my own parents hadn't wanted me. Every birthday, Grandma would bake me a cinnamon cake with vanilla frosting. I loved it, but each year as I blew out my candles, I'd feel something missing. I didn't know what it was then. How could I have known it was the absence of someone who shared my birthday, my DNA, my face? School was challenging socially. Some kids spread rumors that my parents were in jail or that I had been such a bad baby they gave me away. I learned to fight back not with fists, but with achievements. I threw myself into art, discovering I had a talent for painting. The art room became my sanctuary during lunch periods when the cafeteria felt too overwhelming. Grandpa was my rock. He taught me practical skills most girls my age never learned. By 12, I could fix a leaky faucet, change a flat tire, and grow tomatoes that won ribbons at the county fair. "Being independent means never having to wait for someone else to solve your problems," he'd say as we worked side by side. Grandma taught me different but equally valuable lessons. From her, I learned patience through knitting, compassion through volunteering at the local nursing home, and resilience through her stories of surviving the Dust Bowl as a child. She'd sit at our kitchen table, arthritis nodding her fingers as she showed me how to budget our modest income down to the penny. As I entered my teenage years, my questions about my parents grew more insistent. One night, I found myself typing my mother's name, Linda Parker, into a search engine. Grandma had mentioned it once when I pressed her hard. Nothing relevant came up, just thousands of Linda Parkers across the country. I tried various combinations with my father's name, James, but hit nothing but dead ends. It was as if they had vanished into thin air after leaving me. My teenage rebellion wasn't the typical kind. Instead of sneaking out to parties, I'd stay up late scouring adoption forums and social media for any trace of my parents. I was seeking answers, not trouble. Grandma would find me asleep at the computer and gently guide me to bed, whispering, "The past is past, Jillian. We're your present." The financial reality of our situation became clearer to me in high school. My art teacher encouraged me to consider art schools, but when I mentioned this to Grandpa, I saw worry flash across his face. College funds weren't something they could provide. I decided then to focus on scholarships and community college options. My dreams would have to fit our budget. As I entered my senior year of high school, Grandpa's health began declining. His strong hands grew weaker and his breath came in labored gasps when he exerted himself. Congestive heart failure, the doctors said. I took on more responsibilities at home, rushing from school to make dinner, clean the house, and help Grandpa with his medications. Despite being accepted to a state university with a partial scholarship, I enrolled in our local community college instead. I couldn't leave them when they needed me most. I studied art education, attending classes during the day and caring for my grandparents in the evenings. Grandpa passed away during my second year of college. In his final days, as I sat holding his hand in the hospital, he looked at me with unusual clarity and said, "There's more to the story, Jillian, more than we ever told you." Before I could ask what he meant, he slipped into unconsciousness. He died the next morning, taking his secrets with him. After Grandpa's death, Grandma began showing signs of memory loss. She'd start stories and forget the endings, put salt in her coffee instead of sugar, and sometimes call me by my mother's name. During one of these confused moments, she mentioned something that chilled me. The other baby cried more, that's why they took her instead. When I questioned her about this other baby, she'd shake her head and insist she didn't know what I was talking about. I convinced myself it was just her confusion speaking, though the words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. I completed my degree and secured a position teaching art at the same high school I had attended. By my late 20s, I had settled into a predictable but satisfying routine. I helped care for Grandma, taught art to teenagers, and painted landscapes that occasionally sold at local craft fairs. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious developed. I told myself I'd made peace with my unusual upbringing and the parents who had abandoned me. How wrong I was. 5 years ago, my fellow teachers pooled money to buy me a DNA ancestry test kit for Christmas. It seemed like a fun gift for someone with such mysterious origins. "Maybe you'll discover you're secretly royalty," joked the school librarian as I unwrapped it. I spit in the tube and mailed it off without much thought, then promptly forgot about it during the holiday break. Weeks later, an email notification informed me my results were ready, but busy with a new semester, I left it unread for days. One Friday evening, alone with a glass of wine and nothing good on TV, I finally clicked on the link. I scrolled through the expected information about my genetic heritage, mostly Western European, with some Scandinavian thrown in. Interesting, but not life-changing. Then I saw it. Close family match. Predicted relationship twin. I stared at the screen, wine glass frozen halfway to my lips. There must be some mistake. The system was glitching, or I'd misunderstood how this DNA thing worked. I had no siblings. Certainly not a twin. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the match labeled Allison Parker. The last name hit me like a physical blow. Parker. My birth parents' last name. I sent a message through the DNA site's system, trying to sound casual while my mind raced with possibilities. "Hi, I'm Jillian. The system says we might be related. I was raised by my grandparents in Nebraska. Would love to connect if you're interested." For 3 days, I checked my email obsessively. When her response finally came, it was brief. "This is unexpected. Could we video chat? I have questions." We scheduled a call for the following evening. I paced my small house for hours beforehand, alternating between excitement and terror. What if this was all a mistake? What if it wasn't? When her face appeared on my screen, I gasped audibly. It was like looking in a mirror, but with subtle differences. Her hair was styled differently, more expensively cut than mine. She wore designer glasses and what looked like real pearl earrings. But the face was unmistakably mine, from the slightly crooked front tooth to the small mole near our left eyebrow. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "You look exactly like me." "Are you really my sister?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I think I'm your twin," she replied, tears forming in her eyes. We spent hours that first night comparing notes. We sent childhood photos back and forth, marveling at our similar appearances, despite growing up thousands of miles apart. Allison had been raised in San Francisco by James and Linda Parker, our biological parents. They had told her she was born a single child. There had never been any mention of a twin, let alone one they had left behind. "This doesn't make sense," Allison kept saying. Our parents, they're not monsters. They wouldn't separate twins. There must be some explanation." According to Allison, our parents had told her I died shortly after birth, a devastating tragedy they rarely spoke about. They had gone on to build a comfortable life in California, where our father became a moderately successful gallery owner, and our mother worked as an art curator. The irony that I had become an art teacher while unknowingly our parents worked in the art world was not lost on either of us. That night, after ending our call with promises to talk again soon, I confronted my grandmother. At 89, she was frail, and her memory came and went, but when I showed her Allison's picture on my phone, clarity washed over her face. "You found her," she whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "Your sister." "Why didn't you tell me I had a twin?" I demanded, my voice breaking. Grandma took my hand in her papery one. "Your parents were so young, barely 20. Your father was an art student, your mother a waitress. When they found out they were having twins, they panicked. They couldn't afford 2 babies, they said. So they just gave one away, like returning an extra item to a store." The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. "They chose to keep Allison because she was born first, slightly bigger. They asked if we would take you temporarily until they got on their feet. We agreed, thinking you'd be reunited within a year." Grandma's voice quavered. "But they never came back for you. They sent money sometimes for the first few years, then nothing. We legally adopted you when you were 5. And they told Allison I was dead." The betrayal cut deep, imagining my parents creating such a lie. "We don't know what they told her. We lost contact when you were still little." Grandma looked down at her hands. "Maybe they thought it was kinder than the truth." In the days that followed, I cycled through emotions: rage at my parents, jealousy of Allison's privileged upbringing, confusion about my own identity, and underneath it all, a strange exhilaration at finding my twin. Allison and I spoke daily, comparing notes on our lives, discovering uncanny similarities despite our different upbringings. We both loved spicy food, were terrible at math, and had an irrational fear of balloons popping. We both painted, though Allison only as a hobby. We also had undeniable differences. Allison was confident, polished, and career-driven as a marketing executive. I was more introverted, practical, and community-focused. She wore designer clothes and vacationed in Europe. I shopped sales and took weekend trips to nearby state parks. Looking at Allison was like seeing an alternate version of myself, the me that could have been if our parents had chosen differently. After a month of daily conversations, Allison suggested I come visit her in San Francisco. "I want to meet my sister in person," she said, "and I have a spare bedroom. We have 30 years to catch up on." The decision to go was simultaneously the easiest and hardest choice I'd ever made. The flight to San Francisco was the longest 3 hours of my life. I'd never flown before, a fact I was too embarrassed to admit to Allison. Everything about this trip took me out of my comfort zone. I'd arranged for a neighbor to check on Grandma daily, taken a week off from school, and spent money I couldn't really afford on the plane ticket. When I stepped off the plane, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I saw her standing at the arrival gate holding a sign that read, simply, "My twin." Our eyes met across the crowded terminal, and something clicked into place inside me, as if a missing piece had finally been found. We hugged for a long time, neither wanting to let go. People stared as they walked past, doing double takes at our identical faces. One child tugged his mother's sleeve and loudly asked, "Are they the same person?" Allison drove us to her condo in a sleek Audi, navigating San Francisco traffic with ease, while I gawked at the hills and colorful houses. Her home was in a high-rise with views of the bay, all gleaming hardwood and modern furniture that looked more stylish than comfortable. "Welcome to my place," she said, watching my face as I took in the floor-to-ceiling windows and designer kitchen I could fit my entire house inside. "It's beautiful," I said, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the modest teacher's home I lived in. What would she think when she eventually visited me? "It's just a place," she shrugged. "The view is what I pay for." That first evening, we ordered takeout from an upscale sushi restaurant and talked for hours, sitting cross-legged on her living room floor despite the expensive couch nearby. It felt surreal watching her use chopsticks with the same slightly awkward grip I used, seeing her tuck her hair behind her ear exactly as I did. "Tell me about them." I finally asked the question I'd been holding back. "Our parents." Allison's expression softened. "Dad's the dreamer, always has some new artist he's excited about or some renovation plan for the gallery. Mom's more practical, keeps the business running. They're both passionate about art, though, in different ways." She pulled out her phone and began showing me photos. Our parents at her college graduation. Family trips to Mexico, Italy, New York. Christmas mornings with piles of presents, birthday parties with elaborate cakes. Each image was like a knife twisting in my heart. These were moments I should have shared, holidays I should have experienced. In one photo, our mother hugged a teenage Allison, both wearing matching sundresses on a beach. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried silently for 5 minutes. When I returned, Allison was looking at the photos with new eyes. "I never realized how much was taken from you," she said quietly. "And from me, too. I always felt something was missing, but I never knew what." "What do you mean?" I asked. Growing up, I had these weird moments of feeling incomplete. I'd turn to tell something to a person who wasn't there. I'd buy two of something without thinking. Mom once found me setting two places for breakfast when no one was coming over. When she asked why, I apparently said, "For the other me." Allison shook her head. "They took me to a child psychologist who said it was just an imaginary friend phase." "It wasn't imaginary," I whispered. "It was me." That night, lying in her guest bedroom with its luxury sheets and perfect pillows, I thought about the strange bond we shared. We were genetically identical, but had lived completely different lives. Nature versus nurture playing out in the most personal experiment imaginable. The next day, Allison took me shopping on her company card, insisting on buying me clothes I'd never have purchased for myself. "Consider it 30 years of missed birthday presents," she said when I protested the prices. Over the following days, we discovered countless similarities that transcended our separate upbringings. We both organized books by color rather than author or title. We both dipped French fries in milkshakes. We both slept only on the right side of the bed. We also had our differences. Allison thrived on competition and status, while I valued community and stability. She drank expensive wine. I preferred cheap beer. She worked 70-hour weeks climbing the corporate ladder. I spent my free time volunteering at the senior center where Grandma now lived. One evening, as we cooked dinner together in her stylish kitchen, moving around each other with an ease that belied our short acquaintance, Allison broached the subject we'd been avoiding. "Our parents know about you now," she said, carefully chopping vegetables. "I told them after our second video call." I nearly dropped the pot I was holding. "What did they say?" "They were shocked, claimed they never expected the truth to come out. Dad cried." She set down her knife and looked at me. "They want to meet you, Jillian." "I don't know if I'm ready for that." I admitted, my chest tight with anxiety. "I understand," Allison said. "But for what it's worth, I think they've regretted their decision. They just never knew how to fix it." "Some things can't be fixed," I replied, thinking of all the birthdays, Christmases, and ordinary Tuesdays I'd spent wondering why I wasn't enough for them to keep. "Maybe not fixed," she agreed. "But perhaps something new can be built." She hesitated. "They're not perfect people, Jillian, but they're the only parents we have." "You have parents," I corrected her. "I had grandparents." The rest of my visit passed in a blur of sightseeing, deep conversations, and getting to know the twin I never knew existed. When it came time to leave, we both cried at the airport, promising to visit each other soon. "This isn't goodbye," Allison said, hugging me tightly. "This is just the beginning." I returned home with hundreds of photos, a suitcase full of clothes I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to wear in Nebraska, and a heart full of complicated emotions. I loved my newfound sister fiercely, but I wasn't sure how I felt about the parents who had chosen her over me. 6 months after meeting Allison in person, I finally agreed to a video call with our biological parents. Allison had been gently pushing for this, arguing that closure required confrontation. I wasn't sure I wanted closure. The anger had become a familiar companion. We arranged the call for a Sunday afternoon. I sat at my kitchen table laptop, open hair carefully styled, wearing a blouse Allison had bought me. I wanted to look successful, put together. I wanted them to see they hadn't broken me. When their faces appeared on screen, I fought the urge to immediately disconnect. They looked like older versions of photos I'd seen in Allison's albums. My mother had the same eyes as Allison and me, though now surrounded by fine lines. My father had Allison's chin, my nose. For a long moment, nobody spoke. My mother brought her hand to her mouth, tears immediately forming in her eyes. My father just stared as if seeing a ghost. "Jillian," my mother finally whispered. You look so much like your sister. We're identical twins, I replied flatly. That's generally how it works. Allison, present on the call but giving us space for this moment, winced slightly at my tone. We never expected, my father began, then stopped, swallowing hard. That is, we thought your grandparents would tell you about Allison eventually. They didn't know you told Allison I was dead, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. My parents exchanged a guilty look. We never meant for things to happen this way, my mother said. We were so young, barely getting by. When we found out we were having twins instead of one baby, we panicked. So why not give both of us up for adoption? Or keep both of us? Why separate twins? The questions that had haunted me for months finally spilled out. Your grandparents could only take one baby, my father explained, and we thought we could manage with one. The plan was to get financially stable and come back for you within a year. But you never did, I said. We moved to California for a job opportunity right after leaving you with your grandparents. My mother continued. We struggled for years, living paycheck to paycheck. By the time we were stable enough, years had passed. We called once when you were about 4, and your grandmother said you were thriving, calling them Mom and Dad. We convinced ourselves it would be cruel to disrupt your life. So you decided it was better to pretend I didn't exist. I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. We told ourselves you were better off, my father admitted. Your grandparents gave you stability we couldn't have provided then. We sent money when we could, but money doesn't replace parents, I cut in. An uncomfortable silence fell. I noticed for the first time the art on the walls behind them, the stylish furniture of what must be their home in California. You seem to have done well for yourselves, I observed coolly. My father nodded. The gallery took off about 10 years ago. We represent several well-known artists now. How convenient that your success came too late for me to benefit from it. Jillian, Allison interjected gently. I know you're hurt, but… No, she's right to be angry, my mother interrupted. What we did was unforgivable. We've lived with that knowledge every day. Not hard enough to try to find me, though, was it? The words burst out of me. You built your perfect little family and your successful business and just wrote me off as collateral damage. My father's face crumpled. We made a terrible mistake, Jillian. One we can never truly make right. But if you're willing, we'd like to try to be in your life now. I need to think about that, I said, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. This is a lot to process. Of course, my mother said quickly. Take all the time you need. We've waited 30 years. We can wait longer. I ended the call soon after, emotionally drained. Immediately afterward, I blocked their numbers and email addresses. I wasn't ready for their attempts at reconciliation, their excuses, their presence in my life. The following weeks were dark ones. I took a leave of absence from teaching, unable to muster the energy and positivity my students deserved. I slept poorly, dreams filled with 2 baby girls being separated, one taken away in loving arms, while the other cried alone. My friend and fellow teacher Thomas became my lifeline during this period. He brought me groceries when I couldn't face the store, sat with me through tearful evenings, and never pushed me to get over it or move on. He simply witnessed my pain without trying to fix it. Despite blocking direct contact from my parents, I maintained my relationship with Allison. We spoke several times weekly, navigating this strange new sisterhood. She never pressured me to reconcile with our parents, though I knew she hoped I would eventually. They're flawed people who made a terrible decision, she said during one of our calls. Not monsters. That's easy for you to say from the side of the decision that benefited you, I replied, then immediately regretted my sharpness. I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. No, you're right, Allison admitted. I got the better end of this deal. But I lost something too, Jillian. I lost 30 years with my twin sister. Gradually, I channeled my emotional turmoil into art. I began a series of paintings featuring twins separated yet connected. Working on these pieces became a form of therapy, each brushstroke helping me process my complicated feelings. 3 months after the video call, Allison visited me in Nebraska. It was her first time seeing my modest home, meeting my aging grandmother, experiencing the small-town life I'd led. I worried she'd find it all depressingly provincial after San Francisco, but she seemed genuinely charmed. I can breathe here, she said as we walked through the community garden where I volunteered. Everything in San Francisco is so competitive, so driven. This is peaceful. On the second evening of her visit, sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, Allison cautiously brought up our parents again. "They're still hoping to meet you in person someday," she said. "No pressure, but whenever you might be ready, they're waiting." I sighed, watching a pair of birds chase each other across the darkening sky. Why should I give them that chance? They gave up their chance 35 years ago. "Because it might help you heal," Allison suggested. "And because despite everything, they're part of who we are." I considered her words carefully. Maybe, but not yet. What about a neutral location? Not their territory, not yours. Somewhere we could all meet for a weekend. I could be there the whole time, buffer things if needed. The idea took root in my mind. Maybe I did need this confrontation to fully process my feelings. Maybe seeing them in person would help me understand their choice in a way their words over video had not. "I'll think about it," I promised. By the time Allison left to return to California, I had agreed to a meeting the following month. We would gather at a lakeside cabin halfway between our homes, a neutral space where we could navigate these troubled familial waters. As I stood in the airport saying goodbye to my twin, I realized how quickly she had become essential to my life. A piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked before boarding. "Meeting them, I mean." "No," I admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. For us." She hugged me tightly. "For us." The cabin looked like something from a travel magazine perched on the edge of a serene lake surrounded by pine trees. Inside it was all warm wood and comfortable furniture with a stone fireplace and large windows framing the water view. I arrived first, purposely choosing a bedroom and settling in before my parents were due to appear. Allison arrived next, giving me a reassuring hug before helping carry my things to the room I'd claimed. "They'll be here in about an hour," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," I admitted. "Or run away." "Both valid options," she said with a small smile. "But I'm hoping you'll stay." I nodded, too nervous to return her smile. I'd spent 35 years without parents. Why did meeting them now make my palms sweat and my heart race? When their car pulled up outside, I stood frozen by the window watching as they emerged. They looked older in person than they had on screen. My father's hair mostly gray, my mother's face lined with wrinkles around her mouth and eyes. They moved with the comfortable synchronicity of a long married couple, him carrying the bags, her checking something on her phone. Allison went out to greet them while I remained inside gathering my courage. Through the window, I saw her hug them both, talking animatedly, probably preparing them for meeting me. I watched my mother nervously smooth her hair, my father straighten his jacket. When they entered the cabin, I was standing in the center of the living room, arms crossed protectively over my chest. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the genetic connection between us undeniable. I had my father's height, my mother's cheekbones, a blend of features that made up the face Allison and I shared. "Jillian," my mother said, taking a tentative step forward, arms lifting slightly as if she wanted to hug me. I took a step back and she stopped, settling for an awkward smile instead. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you in person." "Hello," I said stiffly, not returning the sentiment. My father cleared his throat. "You have a lovely drive up here. Roads weren't too bad." Small talk. He wanted to do small talk as if this were a normal family gathering, as if he hadn't abandoned me as an infant. "The roads were fine," I replied flatly. Allison jumped in, suggesting we all get settled before dinner. She had arranged for a local restaurant to deliver food, saving us from having to cook together on this first awkward evening. While my parents took their bags to their room, Allison whispered, "They're nervous too. This is hard for everyone." "They lost the right to be nervous 35 years ago," I muttered back, but immediately felt childish. I was an adult, not an abandoned infant. I needed to handle this maturely, even if all I wanted was to scream at them. Dinner was a tense affair. We sat around a rustic wooden table eating overpriced pasta dishes while struggling to find safe conversation topics. My father attempted to engage me by asking about my teaching career, while my mother inquired about my artwork, which Allison had apparently told them about. I answered in short civil sentences, volunteering nothing. Allison carried the conversation, filling silences with stories and questions, preventing the atmosphere from becoming unbearable. After dinner, my father brought out a bottle of expensive wine and several photo albums. "I thought you might want to see these," he said, sliding one toward me. "Family history." I hesitated before opening the album. Inside were photos of young versions of my parents' wedding pictures, and then baby photos of what I initially thought was me, but quickly realized was Allison. There were pictures of family members I'd never met, grandparents who had died without knowing I existed, cousins who had no idea they had another niece. "Your mother's parents never knew about you," my father said softly, noting my focus on a photo of an elderly couple holding toddler Allison. "They died thinking Allison was their only granddaughter. We kept the secret from everyone." "Because you were ashamed?" I asked. "Because we didn't know how to explain it," my mother replied. "The longer it went on, the harder it became to tell the truth." I continued turning pages, seeing Allison grow from baby to child to teenager to adult, marking all the milestones I'd experienced in parallel, but separately. School plays, graduations, family vacations. A lifetime captured in photographs that should have included me. "I have something for you," my mother said, suddenly retrieving her purse. She pulled out a small velvet pouch and handed it to me. "This belonged to my grandmother. I gave Allison hers on her 21st birthday. This one is yours." Inside the pouch was an antique locket, silver with delicate engraving. It matched the one I'd noticed Allison wearing earlier. "There are two because they were originally made for twins," my mother explained. "My grandmother and her sister. I always thought it was sad that I only had one daughter to pass them to. Now I know I was wrong." I closed my hand around the locket, unsure how to feel about this belated gift. Was I supposed to be grateful, to forget 3 decades of absence because of a piece of jewelry? "Thank you," I said stiffly, setting the locket aside without putting it on. As the evening wore on, I observed the easy rapport between my parents and Allison, the inside jokes, the comfortable physical affection. Every interaction highlighted what I had missed, what had been taken from me. By the time I excused myself to go to bed, emotional exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. The next morning, over coffee on the deck overlooking the lake, my father attempted to connect with me one-on-one. "Your grandmother called me when your grandfather died," he said, surprising me. "It's the only time we spoke directly after you were a baby. She wanted me to know, thought I should come to the funeral. I was too cowardly." "You could have met me then," I said. "I was 19. "I know." He looked out at the water. "I've made many mistakes in my life, Jillian, but how we handled things with you is my greatest regret." Later that day, Allison suggested we take the cabin's canoe out on the lake. I agreed, glad for any activity that required minimal conversation. As we paddled, my parents remained on shore, giving us space. "They're trying, Jillian," Allison said as we floated in the center of the lake. "I know it's not enough to make up for everything, but they are trying." "Why are you defending them?" I asked. "They lied to you too. They told you I was dead." "I'm not defending them," she replied. "What they did was wrong, period. But I've had 30 years with them. I know them as real flawed people, not just as the villains in your story." Her words stung, but there was truth in them. To me, James and Linda Parker had been abstract concepts for most of my life, the faceless parents who hadn't wanted me. To Allison, they were just mom and dad, the people who packed her lunches and taught her to drive and helped her move into her first apartment. That evening over dinner, my parents finally revealed what I suspected was the real reason for this gathering. "We have something to tell you both," my father said, setting down his fork. "The gallery is in trouble. Serious trouble." Allison looked surprised. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial," my mother admitted. "We made some bad investments, took out loans we couldn't repay when the pandemic hit. We're facing bankruptcy." I felt a surge of vindication. Their perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. "Why are you telling us this?" I asked. My parents exchanged a glance before my father continued. "We have a proposal. It's unconventional, but please hear us out." What followed was so absurd, I initially thought they were joking. They suggested that Allison and I swap lives for 6 months. Allison would come live in Nebraska, taking a break from her high-stress marketing job, while I would move to San Francisco, living in Allison's condo and spending time getting to know our parents. This would give you a chance to experience the family life you missed, my mother explained earnestly. And Allison has been saying she needs a break sometime to reevaluate her career path. The unspoken motivation was clear. They wanted Allison's marketing expertise to save their failing gallery, but she had been resistant to leaving her corporate job to help them. This swap was their attempt to solve multiple problems at once. "You can't be serious," I said, looking from my parents to Allison, expecting to see the same incredulity on her face. To my shock, she looked thoughtful. "It's not the craziest idea," she said slowly. "I have been thinking about taking a sabbatical, and you've mentioned wanting to experience life in a bigger city with more art opportunities." "This isn't about art opportunities," I snapped. "This is about them trying to manipulate you into saving their business while pretending to do me a favor." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father looked down at his plate, confirming my accusation. My mother attempted to salvage the situation. "That's not the only reason," she insisted. "We genuinely want a chance to know you, Jillian, to make up for lost time in whatever small way we can." 35 years can't be made up in 6 months, I said, standing up from the table. "And I'm not a doll you can just place in your dollhouse to complete your perfect family picture." I walked out of the cabin, needing airspace distance from this surreal conversation. The night was cool, stars reflecting on the still surface of the lake. I found my way to a small dock and sat at the edge, feet dangling above the water. Sometime later, I heard footsteps on the wooden planks behind me. Allison sat down beside me, not speaking at first, just sharing the silence. "They're desperate," she finally said. "The gallery is all they have." "That's not my problem," I replied. "No, it's not," she agreed. "You don't owe them anything." We sat quietly for another moment before she spoke again. "What if we did it, though? Not for them, but for us." I turned to look at her, illuminated by moonlight. "What do you mean?" "I've been feeling stuck, Jillian. My job is killing me slowly. 80-hour weeks, constant pressure, no time for painting or anything I actually enjoy." She gestured toward the peaceful lake. "Meanwhile, you've built this meaningful life, teaching art, creating beauty, making a difference in kids' lives. Part of me envies that. And part of me envies your success, your travel opportunities, the fact that you got to grow up with parents," I admitted. "So maybe this swap isn't about them at all. Maybe it's about us getting to experience the road not taken." Allison bumped my shoulder gently with hers. "Plus, I've kind of got a crush on your friend Thomas." Despite myself, I laughed. "He is pretty great." "So, what do you think? Not 6 months, that's too long. But maybe 3, no strings attached, no obligation to save the gallery." I looked out at the moonlit water, considering the absurdity of the proposal. And yet there was something appealing about the idea. A chance to live a different version of my life, to see what might have been. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Back home in Nebraska, I couldn't shake the idea of the swap despite its obvious absurdity. I discussed it with my best friend Samantha over coffee at our favorite local diner. "Let me get this straight," she said, stirring cream into her cup. "The parents who abandoned you want you to play house with them while your twin sister takes over your life here. That's the plot of a bad Lifetime movie, Jillian." "When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous," I admitted. "Because it is ridiculous," Sam insisted. "What happens after 3 months? You just go back to your regular life, pretending none of it happened." I shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe by then I'll have gotten whatever closure I need." "Or maybe you'll just be more hurt when it ends," she cautioned. "These people abandoned you once. What makes you think they won't do it emotionally all over again?" It was a valid concern, one I'd been wrestling with myself. And yet I couldn't deny the pull of curiosity. What would it be like to live in Allison's world, to spend daily time with the parents I'd wondered about my whole life, to experience even briefly the alternate life that could have been mine? I visited Grandma at her assisted living facility, sitting beside her as she worked on a jigsaw puzzle. At 90, her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but her mind had surprising moments of clarity between the confusion. "I met them," I told her. "My parents." She looked up sharply. Linda and James. How are they? Older, successful at least until recently. They have an art gallery in California. Grandma nodded slowly. Your father always had talent. Used to draw these beautiful sketches when they'd visit you as a baby. This was new information. They visited. First few months they'd drive up from Kansas City every weekend. Then it became once a month. Then they moved west and the visits stopped. She focused intently on finding a puzzle piece. They'd hold you and cry. I always thought they'd come back for you eventually. I digested this information. This image of young parents visiting their abandoned child, not quite able to let go, but not committed enough to keep her either. They want me to come stay with them for a while, I told her. To get to know them. Grandma was quiet for a long moment. Would that make you happy, Jillian? I don't know. I answered honestly. Maybe it would just give me answers. She reached for my hand, her papery skin cool against mine. Just guard your heart, sweetheart. People can change, but they don't always change as much as we hope. Over the next weeks, Allison and I hammered out details of a potential swap. 3 months, not 6. I would live in her condo and spend time with our parents, but with no obligation regarding their business problems. She would stay in my house and substitute teach art at my school, taking a formal leave of absence from her marketing job. What about your boyfriend? I asked during one of our planning calls, suddenly remembering the photographs I'd seen of Allison with a handsome man. Mark and I broke up 2 months ago, she said. He wanted to get married, I wasn't sure. Another reason a break might be good for me. We created detailed guides to each other's lives. I made lists of my students with notes about their personalities and artistic strengths. She documented her condo's quirks, local restaurants, and the best driving routes around San Francisco. We discussed our daily routines, our friends, the small details that made up our lives. The plan took on a momentum of its own, changing from an absurd suggestion to a real possibility to a definite plan. We set a date arranged for time off from our respective jobs and began preparing our friends and colleagues for our temporary absences. The night before the official swap day, Allison flew to Nebraska. We would spend one day together in each location, handing over the reins to our respective lives. Are we crazy for doing this? I asked as we sat on my back porch that evening sharing a bottle of wine. Definitely, she grinned. But sometimes crazy is exactly what you need. The next morning, we drove to my school together where I introduced her to my principal and fellow teachers. My friend Thomas seemed particularly taken with her offering to show her around town during her stay. I pretended not to notice their immediate chemistry. After school, we visited Grandma, who was having one of her confused days, and kept mixing us up, calling us both by our mother's name. As we were leaving, she suddenly grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Don't let them hurt you again, she said with unexpected clarity. Promise me. I promise, I said, kissing her forehead. That evening, we exchanged house keys, car keys, and copies of our detailed guides to each other's lives. The next morning, I would fly to San Francisco while Allison remained in Nebraska. 3 months, Allison said, hugging me goodbye. Then we evaluate. 3 months, I agreed. Try not to completely take over my life. She laughed. No promises. Your friend Thomas is pretty cute. I rolled my eyes but found I didn't mind the idea of Allison and Thomas together. They had similar energy, both outgoing and optimistic. Maybe they would be good for each other. As I boarded the plane the next morning, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. For 3 months, I would step into my twins' life, experiencing the path not taken. For 3 months, I would have parents. What could possibly go wrong? The first week in San Francisco was a blur of adjustments. Allison's condo was beautiful but felt like a hotel impersonal, despite her attempts to make me feel at home. The city's constant noise and activity were overwhelming after the quiet of my small town. My parents invited me to dinner my second night there. They lived in a stylish Victorian home in a nice neighborhood, clearly showcasing their previous success. When I arrived, I discovered they had transformed their guest room into what they imagined a teenage girl's room would look like, with floral bedding and posters of bands that had been popular when I was in high school. We thought you might want to stay over sometimes, my mother explained nervously, showing me the room. to make up for, well, the room you should have had growing up. It was simultaneously touching and painful, this belated attempt at parenting. I thanked them politely, but knew I wouldn't be staying overnight anytime soon. During those first weeks, my parents showered me with gifts and attention, as if trying to compress a lifetime of birthdays and Christmases into a few months. My father brought home art supplies he thought I might like. My mother took me shopping for clothes I didn't need. They introduced me to their friends as our daughter visiting from Nebraska, with no explanation of our complicated history. Gradually, I began spending more time at their gallery observing their business practices. It quickly became clear why they were in financial trouble. My father kept investing in unknown artists based on passion rather than marketability, while my mother struggled to keep up with the digital transformation necessary for modern business. Meanwhile, my weekly video calls with Allison revealed she was thriving in my simpler life. She had bonded with my students, made friends with my colleagues, and was spending increasing amounts of time with Thomas. "Your small town is growing on me," she admitted during our third weekly call. "Everyone knows everyone. People bring casseroles when they hear you're sick. It's like living in a Hallmark movie." "And Thomas?" I asked with a knowing smile. She blushed. "He's growing on me too." As for me, I was slowly adjusting to life in San Francisco. I explored the city's museums and art scenes, finding inspiration for my own work. I painted more than I had in years, using Allison's spacious living room as a makeshift studio. I also began spending more time with my parents, learning their routines and rituals. Sunday morning pancakes at a local diner. My father's habit of reading poetry aloud after dinner. My mother's evening walks along the bay. I observed them as if studying a different species, noting their interactions, their inside jokes, the rhythm of their long marriage. Sometimes I could almost imagine I'd grown up with them. Other times, the weight of all the missing years felt crushing. During the 5th week of our swap, I discovered something troubling. While looking for a sketchbook in my father's office at the gallery, I found documents outlining a plan to sell the business to one of Allison's major clients. The papers referenced leveraging our daughter's connections and included detailed notes about when Allison was expected to return to her marketing job. The discovery confirmed my initial suspicions. They had orchestrated this whole swap primarily to access Allison's professional network, hoping to save their failing business. Their interest in reconnecting with me was secondary at best, a convenient story to persuade Allison to help them. I confronted them that evening at their house, placing the documents on their dining table. "You lied to me," I said. "This was never about getting to know me. This was about using Allison's connections to save your business." My parents exchanged guilty glances. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "Jillian, that's not entirely true," she began. "Then explain these," I interrupted, tapping the papers. My father sighed heavily. "Yes, we hoped Allison might help with the business situation. But that doesn't mean we didn't genuinely want to connect with you too." "You've had 35 years to connect with me," I reminded him. "You only reached out when you needed something from my sister." "We're about to lose everything, Jillian," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "The gallery is our life's work. We're desperate. So desperate you'd manipulate your daughters." I stood up, gathering the papers. "I'm going back to Nebraska. This whole experiment was a mistake." "Please don't go," my father said, standing as well. "Yes, we had ulterior motives for the timing, but these weeks with you have meant everything to us. We're finally getting to know our daughter." "One of your daughters," I corrected. "The one you didn't choose." I left their house that night, certain I would cut my San Francisco stay short. But lying awake in Allison's expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, I began to see another possibility. Perhaps this crisis could become an opportunity, not just for them, but for me as well. The next morning, I didn't call Allison or book a flight home. Instead, I went to the gallery before my parents arrived and began looking through their business records, financial statements, and marketing materials. As an art teacher, I had limited business knowledge, but I had common sense and a fresh perspective. When my parents arrived an hour later, they were clearly surprised to see me. "I thought you'd be gone," my mother said cautiously. "I'm not staying for you," I told them. "I'm staying because running away won't give me closure, and because this gallery is my sister's inheritance too, whether you've thought of it that way or not." Over the following days, I immersed myself in learning about their business. I discovered multiple problems: outdated marketing approaches, poor inventory management, and overpriced artwork that wasn't moving. With my outsider's perspective, I saw opportunities they'd missed. You need to showcase local artists, I told them over dinner at their house a week after our confrontation. Create community events, art classes, reasons for people to come in even if they're not buying. We've always focused on serious collectors, my father objected. And that pool is shrinking, I pointed out. But there's a whole generation of young professionals who want original art at accessible prices. Plus, your online presence is practically non-existent. Gradually, they began listening to my suggestions. We started small, organizing an evening event featuring affordable works by local art students. The response was enthusiastic, bringing new faces into the gallery and generating modest but important sales. I called Allison to discuss the situation, explaining what I'd discovered and my new approach. "So you're helping them after all," she said, sounding surprised but pleased. "On my terms, not theirs," I clarified. "And I need your expertise too, but again, on our terms." Together, Allison and I developed a revival strategy for the gallery. She connected us with a web designer from her professional network who created a modern online platform for the business. I worked with local art schools to establish an internship program, bringing young energy into the space while giving students valuable experience. My parents watched these transformations with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "You're saving our gallery," my father said one evening as we closed up after a successful community art class I'd organized. "I'm helping build something new," I corrected him. "Not saving the old." As our 3-month swap neared its end, several unexpected developments occurred. First, Allison called to tell me she had fallen in love with my small-town life, and more significantly with Thomas. She was considering opening her own marketing consultancy in Nebraska, serving local businesses who couldn't afford big city agencies. "Would you mind," she asked hesitantly, "if I stayed? Not in your house, of course, but in town." "I think it would be wonderful," I said sincerely. "But what about your career in San Francisco? I've been killing myself for that job for years, and for what? To afford an expensive condo where I spend barely any time, to impress people I don't even like." She sounded lighter than I'd ever heard her. "I'm happier teaching art to teenagers and having dinner with Thomas than I ever was closing million-dollar marketing deals." The second development was my growing attachment to San Francisco's vibrant art community. I'd connected with local artists, galleries, and art educators, finding a niche for myself that excited me professionally. A private arts high school had even approached me about a teaching position after seeing my work with the gallery's intern program. The third and most surprising development was a gradual, tentative connection forming with my parents. As we worked together to revitalize the gallery, I saw sides of them I hadn't expected. My father's genuine passion for nurturing artistic talent, my mother's resilience and practical intelligence, their deep love for each other despite decades of financial ups and downs. I still hadn't forgiven them for abandoning me. I wasn't sure I ever would completely. But I was beginning to see them as flawed, complex humans, rather than the mythical villains of my childhood imagination. 2 weeks before our scheduled swap back, I made a decision. I invited my parents to dinner at a neutral restaurant to discuss the future. "I'm not moving back to Nebraska," I told them once we were seated. "At least not right away. I've been offered a teaching position here and I want to explore that opportunity." Their faces lit up with hope, though they tried to contain their reactions. "That's wonderful news," my mother said carefully. "We'd love to have you stay in San Francisco." "I'm not moving in with you," I clarified. "Allison has offered to let me keep her condo since she's planning to stay in Nebraska, but I would like to continue working with you at the gallery part-time while I teach." "We'd be honored," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "And there's one more thing," I added, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to my mother. "This is for you." Inside was a framed photograph of my grandmother taken recently at her assisted living facility. She was smiling, her wrinkled face serene despite her confusion. "Your mother," I said softly. "She asked about you when she has clear days. I think it's time you visited her." My mother's hands trembled as she held the photograph. "Do you think she'd want to see me after everything?" I think she's been waiting for 30 years, I replied. The following weekend, we made the trip to Nebraska together. Allison met us at the airport, hugging me tightly before greeting our parents more formally. Thomas was with her, their linked hands confirming what her phone calls had suggested. The meeting between my mother and grandmother was both heartbreaking and healing. Grandma was having a good day cognitively, instantly recognizing her daughter despite the decades that had passed. "Linda," she whispered, reaching out a gnarled hand. "You finally came back." "I'm so sorry, Mom," my mother sobbed, kneeling beside Grandma's chair. "For everything." "You were always so stubborn," Grandma said, patting my mother's hair. "Just like your daughter." "Which one?" my mother asked with a tearful laugh. "Both of them," Grandma replied with surprising clarity. "Twins in more ways than DNA." That evening, we all gathered in my small house for dinner, an awkward but meaningful family reunion. My parents, my twin, my grandmother, Thomas, and me. 3 generations connected by blood, separated by choices, now cautiously finding our way back to each other. 2 years have passed since our unconventional family experiment began. The life I've built isn't anything I could have imagined, but it feels right in ways I never expected. I split my time between San Francisco and Nebraska, teaching art at the private school during the academic year, and spending summers in my hometown. Allison and Thomas married last fall in a simple ceremony in my backyard, with both our parents and my grandmother in attendance. The gallery has stabilized financially thanks to our combined efforts. I've established an art therapy program there, working specifically with adoptees and others from non-traditional family structures. Sharing my own complicated story has connected me with people navigating similar paths. Grandma now lives in an assisted living facility near my Nebraska home, where I visit her weekly when I'm in town. My parents make the trip every few months, making peace with their past choices, one visit at a time. My relationship with my parents remains complex. There are still moments when the old pain surfaces, when I remember all I missed. But there are also new memories forming, whether it's Sunday dinners when I'm in San Francisco or holiday gatherings that bring our unconventional family together. Allison and I have created our own tradition, a twin-day celebration on the anniversary of our reunion. We spend 24 hours together, just the two of us, acknowledging both the years lost and the bond reclaimed. The most surprising outcome has been my own healing journey. Through art therapy and honest conversations, I've made peace not just with my parents, but with myself. I've learned that my identity isn't defined by abandonment, but by resilience, not by what was taken from me, but by what I've built. Forgiveness, I've discovered, isn't a single moment, but a daily choice. Some days it comes easily, others it feels impossible. But each day I choose connection over resentment is a victory for the family we're creating now, not the one that might have been. In sharing my story with students and therapy group participants, I've found purpose in my pain. Every person who tells me they feel less alone after hearing my experience confirms that even our deepest wounds can become bridges to others. Last month, a young art student asked if I regretted finding my twin and parents, given all the complicated emotions it unleashed. "Never," I answered without hesitation. Living with questions is harder than living with difficult answers. That's the lesson I carry forward, that family can be lost, found, created, and recreated throughout our lives. That healing isn't linear. That identity exists beyond childhood wounds. That sometimes life's greatest plot twists reveal our deepest strength. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw yourself? Has forgiveness been a struggle or a healing force in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with someone navigating their own complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even the most painful beginnings can lead to beautiful, unexpected destinations.